How to make the dough for the empanadas. We start with 2 cups of flour, about 3/4 of a glass of water, half a tablespoon of salt, and 3.5 tablespoons of butter, which I just melted in the microwave. So I'm going to start by adding the salt to the water, and in a bigger mixing bowl, I'm going to mix the flour and the butter together. And I'm going to mix the flour and the butter until it becomes kind of a sandy consistency. So I'll return once I get to that point. Okay, so once you get to this point where, as you can see, it's kind of sandy, breaks apart, flaky, is when I'm gonna add the salty water. And I ended up adding another tablespoon of butter, just because the 3.5 was not enough. So in total I put 4.5 tablespoons of butter. And now I'm gonna add the salty water to that. And I'm going to slowly mix this together until it becomes one dough that I can just start forming and working. And it's kind of hard to work with one hand, so I'll come back once I have it mixed into one big dough. Okay, so I worked the dough until I was able to make it into a ball. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work the dough for about 6 to 8 minutes. So to do that, I usually push, pull it back together, bring it back, push, pull it. And I just do that for about 6 to 8 minutes. And there's different ways to work the dough, so if you know another way, that's fine. We're just basically going to work it until it's stretchy and soft. This is another way to work it. Okay, so I've been working the dough for 6 to 8 minutes. As you can see, it's quite stretchy, quite soft. So that's kind of what we're going for. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a ball. I'm going to saran wrap it and put it in the fridge for an hour or two. At the very minimum, an hour. If you can do 2 hours, then that will give the dough a better chance to settle. So I'll just wrap it like that, and into the fridge it goes. So we'll be back in an hour or two to unroll it and start cutting the empanada covers. Okay, so I pulled the pizza dough out of the fridge and just put some flour on the cutting board, some flour on the rolling, and then I'm just going to roll it until it's really thin. So I'll get back once it's ready to cut.
Record. Sí, empezó.
Okay, so now that the dough is nice and thin, we're going to start cutting it 10 to 12 centimeters or 4 to 5 inches in diameter, and a circular shape.
The shape you can see.
I don't have anything that I can cut with, so I just use this thing. But Para más. ¿Listo?
Yeah.
Okay, so to store them, I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on each one. And then what I'm going to do is in between them, so that they don't get stuck, I'm going to put a little bit of saran paper, or you can use wax paper. It's all the same thing. So a little bit of flour, fill it up. and we'll just store them like that. And then with this extra dough, I'm just gonna roll it again and then make probably 4 more. So in total we'll have between 12 and 15 empanada covers.
Just
Okay,
like making cookies. You pick up the leftover dough.
Apagaste, ¿no? I'm gonna make the meat filling for the empanadas. All you need is 3/4 of a cup of yellow onions. I already diced them. A tablespoon of chopped garlic. About 3/4 of a cup of olives. Here I have already pre-sliced black olives. You can use green olives, it's the same. 3/4 of a cup of cheese. I like using mozzarella cheese. Then 3 eggs. We're gonna have 2 hard-boiled eggs, and then 1 egg will be for later on once we roll the empanadas. Some salt, some pepper, and then some oregano. And a little bit over a pound of meat. So we're gonna start cooking this. I usually start by putting a little bit of olive oil. I'll turn this on to high, and I'll start with cooking the onions and the garlic. Once the onions are yellow, then I add the meat and the olives. Also, if I have bell peppers, I like adding red bell peppers and as much as the onions, 3/4 of a cup. But I don't have any red peppers now, and it won't affect the recipe that much. We'll be back once this is cooking. Once the onions are cooking, gonna add the black olives. And here's where I will add the red peppers if I had that. And I'm also gonna add the meat. I'm just gonna mix all of this together and then cook it until the meat is all done. And here's where we can add a little bit of salt, a little bit of black pepper, and a little bit of oregano. Okay, and I'll show you once the mixture is all ready. Okay, so I cooked the onions and the garlic until they turned yellow, until they were a little on the golden side, and then I added the black olives. Here's where I would add the red peppers, and I added the meat. I just mixed it all together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this to medium heat. I'm just going to let it mix so that the meat starts cooking all over, and I'll stir it every now and then just to make sure that it cooks evenly all the way through. Once it's all cooked, I'm going to put it in a pot. I'm going to add a little bit of extra virgin olive oil and the cheese, and then I'm going to leave it in the fridge for about an hour. That way everything mixes together and all the flavors combine with each other. In the meanwhile, what I usually do is I boil the 2 eggs. In this case I already boiled them, so I'll show you what I do with them. I'm going to dice them up and then add them to the whole mixture before I put it in the fridge. So the boiled eggs, I just pulled them out, peeled them, and then I mashed them together just so that they're all in bits and pieces. The meat looks like it's cooked all the way through and even. And since this meat has some grease with it, I'm not going to add the olive oil to the mixture. If you have a drier meat, then that's when I would add a little bit of extra virgin olive oil just to make sure that the whole mixture isn't too dry. And that way the empanadas are not dry. So I'm going to put this in here. And here's where I'm going to add the cheese. Again, the cheese just to add a little bit of flavor and also to make it a moist mixture that's not dry. So now I'm going to mix this together. I'm going to need something to mix it with. There you go. And once I'm done mixing it, I'm going to cover it and put it in the fridge for about an hour. That will give it a chance to cool down and for all the flavors to mix. You also want it to cool down, that way when you make the empanadas you can just grab it with your hand, put a little bit in each empanada and cover them up. Makes it a lot easier, that way you're not burning yourself. And I really think it allows all the flavors to settle together and mix well. So that looks mixed. And I'll put this in the fridge and be back to when we roll the empanadas so I can show you how to do that. Okay, so we're back. So for this part we're gonna need an egg, half a glass of milk, and some sugar. So let me show you what I'm gonna do over here. I put an egg along with a little bit of milk, and I'm gonna put some sugar in this, and now I'm going to mix this together. And this will be the covering that we put on the outside of the empanada. This is going to give that golden look to the empanada and that sweet taste on the dough. Okay, so you can see what it ends up looking like. And I'm going to grab a brush for that. And I can grab the dough. So you see your dough's a little elastic, so you can play with it. If it's not big enough, you can stretch it a little bit and make it nice and big. And what we're going to do, we're just going to grab a little bit of the filling, whether it's the ham and cheese, the meat filling, or whichever filling you created. On the outside of the dough, it's going to grab a little bit of milk and make a little edge around the edge of the dough. So I put the filling. We can carefully roll this back. Now I'm going to push this down, that way it stays in place right on the seam. And then what I like to do is I like roll right here, do the same thing on the other side. And I roll it right here too. And then with a fork, I'm going to make little edges around it. And what you end up having, as you see, I rolled it here in, rolled it here in, I rolled it on this corner in, and I did the little edge with a fork, that way it seals it in place. And the last step is with this mixture that we made. That's the sugary, eggy mixture. Just going to mix that. I'm going to coat this on the outside. And that's going to give it that nice golden look and the nice sweet flavor on the outside of the dough. And there's an empanada. So then that's ready to pick up. I buttered this tray earlier, so you can see the butter there. That way the dough won't stick to it, but we'll just place it right there. And usually when I make this I do an assembly line, that way I can get through all of them a lot easier, but I just wanted to show you one at a time right there. And I'm going to preheat the oven at 350 degrees. And there we go. So I'll be back once I have the rest of the empanadas prepared. Okay, so once again, milk, put on finger, If you don't have milk, you can do it with water. I like doing it with milk. Like the little flavor it gives it to the crust that ends up being on the outside. So you see, you don't need too much meat to fill up each individual one. But the more you put in, the harder it will be to close later. But as you get better, you can put more and more meat inside of them. And the dough is always stretchy, so you can always, if you put too much meat, you can always stretch the dough a little bit extra. As you see, I have plenty of meat left over, which I can just put in the freezer and save for the next time. That tends to happen. I'm gonna wipe this real quick. Okay, now we'll start rolling. See, this one's kind of full, but I'll just work my way around it, and there we go. Never push from the top, always from the side. The dough on this one is a little thin. It's okay. You can roll this edge differently if you want to. My mom likes to roll little pieces aside, but I just find that really hard, and it's really easy to do it with a fork, so I take the easy way. So you see now we have about 15, 16 empanadas right here. The oven's preheated, so I'm just gonna stick them right in the oven for 15 to half an hour. And what you're looking for is just a golden color, so I'm gonna show you that once they're ready. But the meat inside is already cooked. The dough has egg, yes, it needs to be cooked, but the egg will cook really quickly. So once they're nice and golden, nice and toasty, then we'll take them out. It's important to make sure that they don't get too burnt. Okay, so I just took them out of the oven. Took about 25 minutes. That color right there is what you're going for. If you put more of the egg, sugar and milk mixture, the more you put, the richer the color will be. So you see some of them are more white, some of them have more of the color. Kind of depends how much you applied. And you can also see it down here as the egg mixture falls down to the crescents. You can see where they start getting cooked. So yeah, that's the end result. Hope you like the recipe.